Welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everyone. I'm your host, Logan Crawford. Turkey and the European Union say they have agreed on key points of a bold proposal, a plan to help resolve the migrant crisis aimed at deterring migrants from attempting the dangerous journey to Europe. Under the proposed deal, Ankara would agree to take back all of the migrants who leave Turkish shores for Europe in the future on the condition that one Syrian refugee is resettled in Europe for every Syrian refugee that is returned to Turkey. Let us say hello to our guests. John Davenport, a professor of philosophy at Fordham University; Mustafa Tablani, a journalist; Alena Shautsova, an immigration attorney in Brooklyn. Alena, you and I were talking about this a little bit in the beginning. Is this deal is strange in that either you have a legitimate reason to immigrate or you don't, right?
That's right, and I believe that this deal will be in violation of the international treaties, because you can't just grab somebody who's already claiming asylum and forcefully return them back to Turkey and potentially back to Syria. I just don't see how this is legitimate.
Let's talk about one prominent Syrian refugee, or an ancestor of a Syrian refugee, and that's Steve Jobs, Mustafa. Yes. He comes from Syrian stock, if you will. This man who has changed everything in the world because of this device, an iPhone, wouldn't be in the United States, might not have been educated to the degree he was, might have not had the opportunities that he had if he was not allowed to come here to the United States. These are the kind of people we're missing out on if we don't allow people to immigrate in this nation of immigrants, right?
Yes, and that's not only Syrian refugees, but there are other countries as well. And most people don't know that there are very strict regulations about the refugees and asylum programs. They are not getting some like single male and getting to America, and these are usually families, and they are usually UN approved. They go through UN system first. They go rigorous background check, and then their lives in danger. It's not like they're not looking for a job. There are people out there to get them. And Turkey is not a safe zone either. In Turkey, all the fighter groups have people inside Turkey, and one colonel, I think, or general, ex-general, was actually abducted and taken back to Syria. So if those people stay there, their lives will still be in danger. And if America can take them as much as they can, it will obviously benefit American society as well.
John, in this political climate, it's very difficult for our leaders to say, let's have Syrian refugees come to this country, unfortunately, right?
Right. I mean, it's just horrible to see presidential candidates on the stump saying the sorts of things they've been saying. I don't want to allow any refugees in, or if you're in the case of Trump, anyone who's Muslim. We want to, make them all wait. We're going to figure out what the root of the problem is. It's obvious what the root of the problem is. You have a civil war that's been raging for 4 years. You have over 300,000 people killed. I just am aghast at the sorts of things that we hear from American politicians who are, forcing us to miss out on people like Steve Jobs. And refugees from Iraq and Afghanistan as well. I mean, we have refugees from war zones across the world. Actually, I think Germany is going to end up doing well in the next 2 decades. People will see that there are more Steve Jobs in Germany because of the amount of refugees that they've taken. I guess that would go for Sweden and some of the Scandinavian nations as well. They will actually see economic growth and innovation and a boom from the refugees who are coming in.
Alena, the most outspoken on this crisis has been Donald Trump, who has said no refugees, no immigration at all, he's talking about now. Right. And he's also talking about a complete Muslim ban. Another part of his proposal is to create safe zones within Syria where the refugees can go. On the surface, it sounds like a good idea. These people who are uprooted from Syria, protect them in their own countries. Is it a good idea, bad idea? What's your opinion?
I just don't think it's a practical idea. If you do not eliminate the whole conflict, I don't think it's possible to create a safe zone. It's also going to involve so many resources. Like an army from a different country has to control the safe zone. And who is going to be? UN forces, European forces, Russia? Who is going to be the person who is maintaining the safe zone? So I do not think it's happening. It's in my perspective. I just don't think it's possible.
And Mustafa, you were saying many of the Syrian immigrants and other people immigrating here from North Africa and from the Middle East are not these strapping 25-year-old men that Donald Trump talks about, but are actually families who are carefully vetted by the United States.
And all those policies date back, I think, to Ronald Reagan era. I mean, these are policies well established by Republicans, by Democrats, and over the years, they are proven to be successful. Now, out of a fear or just getting votes for political reasons to stop those people, I think it's very immoral action.
John, who is to blame for this Syrian crisis?
Assad, and of course those who are backing him, Vladimir Putin, the leadership in Iran, Hezbollah, and I guess I could add in at this point American politicians like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, who say that they would keep Assad in power because they think that that's a bulwark against ISIS. I mean, I've said in other forums publicly, I think they're crazy. They wouldn't ally themselves with other dictators like Castro if he were fighting ISIS. We have
But if Assad goes, who fills the void?
Well, the only way that that could happen without creating chaos beyond what we already see in Syria is exactly as Alena said, some sort of an international coalition, an army to come in and secure that nation. You have to reconstruct a nation like Syria after it's been completely shattered by this kind of conflict. And my hope is that Turkey may get out of this this deal with the EU is so strange. Maybe it will lead to further discussion between Turkey and the rest of Europe about a long-term solution involving an army, a coalition army from different nations in the Middle East and Europe, maybe some American participation, I hope, to secure Syria. And that would be the only way that we could create safe zones. It's strange that none of these Western nations want to get to the root of the problem. They just want to pass the buck elsewhere, as it were. Let's deal with the symptom by moving the immigrants somewhere else and ignore, while completely ignoring the root of the problem.
Everybody seems to want a quick solution. Have you dealt with any of the Syrian refugees in this country? And tell me what that process has been like.
Absolutely. You know, I have most of the cases that I'm dealing with inquiries from families asking how we can get here, what can we do. Some people are seeking asylum, but to seek asylum you have to be physically in the United States. And unfortunately many people, they just can't get here and they have to find some other routes and some other solutions. So I consult them on international law for as much as I can. I try to help the families to find maybe other solutions like family sponsorship of different family members into the United States. And it's the only point that I can make is that it's been increasingly hard and harder to overcome different barriers and different law barriers to help those people. And I feel terrible for them because they don't have anywhere else to go. And I feel that we as a community will have to provide some sort of a solution, and everybody has to pitch in and accept responsibilities. We can't just say, oh, Turkey, be responsible, act as a sifter for all these people. It's just not going to happen.
Speaking of Turkey, there's a saying that Rahm Emanuel is famous for: never let a good crisis go to waste. And it seems like President Erdogan is looking to exploit this crisis for political gains. Tell me what he's doing over there.
Well, he's holding the cards and playing it well, but the United States and European Union must decide that is he a reliable ally? And everything up to this point shows that he is not. And you are giving $3 billion to this person, and he's not going to use it for his own operations. And are you sure that this money will go to, of course, shelter and food? They're going to be, but are they going to provide job opportunities? Are going to be trainings or other transitions? And you are giving $3 billion to this guy, and he's going to sponsor his own whatever doing in Syria, and for his own benefit, which is consolidate the power in Turkey, be the only person in power.
John, is part of the problem that is we'd like to impose our idea of a republic democracy on these countries where a republic democracy may or may not work?
Well, it's true that you can't just sort of instantly transform a country that's been under dictatorship, like, say, Syria, for decades and decades. I mean, in the case of Turkey, we have a country that's been building a democratic culture for quite some time. It's a shame you have a leader like Erdogan who is closing down independent journalists and networks that are opposed to him. It takes some time for democracy to start working. It doesn't work perfectly in the United States, but those kinds of institutions can be built if people's most fundamental rights to security and peace and basic material necessities are secured. So I don't say that we could go into Syria and reconstruct the nation and turn it into a perfect democracy within 2 or 3 years, but look at the rebuilding of Germany and Japan after World War II. Now we have two nations that were previously fascist dictatorships that are among the most rights-respecting democratic nations in the world. They contribute enormously to the world community. I think before we worry about, though, how we're going to build more democracy in the Middle East, we need to think about some kind of a global treaty on immigrants. And I mean, this is a big issue for the EU right now, but it's a big issue for the whole world. We need to find some way of fairly sharing that burden among all nations that are able to do so, and looking to figure out nation-building strategies to get to the roots of these problems. Clearly, a politician like Donald Trump isn't going to be involved in building such a treaty there. So my hope is that we'll have a leader here who can promote some sort of a final peaceful solution for Syria that allows rebuilding.
But to play devil's advocate, we have had Obama in office during this entire crisis, and he's done little to ameliorate the suffering.
That's right. And I voted for him twice, but I'll be very critical of President Obama on this issue. I think that he has not done what his senior foreign policy advisors, I believe Hillary Clinton, Samantha Power, Susan Rice, many of the people on his team, John Kerry, urged him to take action in Syria. Had he taken action, had Europe joined him in even as late as the summer of 2013, we might never have even seen the rise of ISIS. I mean, that might have been prevented if the Assad government had been forced to either fall apart completely by military force or to negotiate some kind of an exit strategy. It's going to require military force. And of course, it can't just be Western nations. We don't expect the United States to do these things on its own every time. But it could be the United States with European nations, with Turkey, and with other Middle Eastern partners. And the president, for whatever reason, I mean, he's just trying to get us out of wars. That's his approach. I'm sorry to say, I think that would be Bernie Sanders' approach as well, and that's why I can't support him for president.
Unfortunately, sometimes that signals weakness to other countries. If you take military might off the table, they're like, great, they're not going to go after us. Alena, what's your best advice to a family member who has someone overseas who would like to seek asylum here in the United States?
Well, first of all, I would say that they need to do it the right way with the help of lawyers or pro bono lawyers, whoever they can afford and find, because that's very important. We know that people get criticized for that. They have to basically work the right way. As I said previously, if the family members are still in Syria or Middle Eastern countries, they have to go to the UN organizations there to start the process, refugee process. If they can afford, if they can find a solution to get a visa to the United States, even if they cross the border, I don't advise it to anybody, but they, at the border, they can ask for asylum. Already, even if you're close to the United States border, at the port of entry, you have a legal right to ask for asylum, and then you cannot be deported back. So that's very important that people should know about that.
I just want to get Mustafa in on the conversation. Where do you see this crisis heading, Mustafa?
It's going to go on and on because Russia will never let Laskia go. It took them maybe 1,000 years to go down to Mediterranean Sea, and now they have a port there. They're not going to let Assad go. They're not going to get their Navy fleet go. They're not going to abandon Assad. And that's whatever game plan you have to count on that.
I thought it was interesting, John, I was reading in the Times that Gaddafi used to play the role that Erdogan is looking to play the role of now, where Gaddafi was actually paid by Europe to keep the refugees in.
Well, yeah, that's a terrible irony, isn't it, right, that we would work with. Of course, I think Gaddafi was a far more evil dictator who committed numerous atrocities. Whatever the problems are with Erdogan, I couldn't pin that on him. But there is something perverse in this instance as well about trying to pay a nation to keep refugees there. I mean, Turkey already has over 2 million, I believe, Syrian refugees. And if I might just say, this European plan, if it's passed through and accepted by all the European powers it has to go through, it seems to imply that only one half of they've already decided in advance that 1 out of every 2 Syrians at most has a legitimate claim to asylum. It seems to me that given the state of affairs in Syria, it looks like it would all be almost automatic that any Syrian person would have a claim to asylum anywhere in the world. I can't say, maybe a few people living in some of the most peaceful, protected parts of Damascus or the West Coast are safe at the moment, but I mean, even that's theoretical. The situation could change so quickly. So
John,
really,
I'm going to hold you there because we're running out of time, but thank you for your time. Alena, Mustafa, as we started this conversation, I said that either you have a right to asylum or you don't. It's not really fair that the European Union and Turkey say, well, half of you have a real right, half of you don't.
That's great.
Doesn't make sense.